Okay, so the other video is off and being uploaded. My camera, hang on a second. Okay, hang on. Here we go. It's confused by the gray. And also, by the way, the tape up there is just because I don't want to punch a bunch of holes in this part of the wall. Because once all this, or once the conditions change relative to the lockdown in this state and all of that kind of crap, I won't use this space this way. And we may actually have to put parts of machinery in here to build other stuff. So all this stuff is flexible, and gaffer's tape works just great. Doesn't leave residues or any of that kind of thing. Okay, so let's put that away. Anyway, so this is about woo ships, okay? And so the woo ships are heading away from us. And the woo ships are the Tic Tac UFO, the other UFOs that we're seeing. There's many of them that have a common that have common elements in their propulsion systems that I've deduced as a result of having read through Boscovich, which, where did I put that copy out here? Oh no. Well, I said it somewhere. Undoubtedly was looking something up, and I've got the other copy in the other office. So anyway, so back to the woo ships. So in Boscovich, you will find the end of section 1, part 1. You'll see there's a number of articles in which I don't remember the numbers, but it'd probably be like in the mid 200s, like 240 or something like that. Anyway, in which he mentions oscillations. Oscillations are a natural response in universe to magnetic drives traveling from one limit point of cohesion to another limit point of cohesion, or from a limit point of repulsion to a limit point of repulsion. In the process of this, he talks about oscillations at a level to dissipate energy. And that if it was done right, you could take vast quantities of energy, moving incredibly fast, and dissipate that energy in virtually no time with no inherent inertial effect on the object that's being propelled by that energy. And he discusses this. He doesn't discuss it in those terms. It is a translation from Latin. He was not trying to describe UFOs. He was trying to describe aspects of the ether, but these UFO ships, these woo ships, operate on a magnetic drive. We could also say, equally valid, that they operate on a limit point drive, because they hop from limit point to limit point, and you can vary the distance between the limit points, but it takes the same amount of time essentially to go from one to the other. So if the two limit points that you want to transit to, one's here and one's on the moon, it'll take you a second to make that transition. If one's here and one's 50 feet away, it'll take you a second to make that transition. So you can decide how fast you want to go by how close you set those limit points, or how far away. So if you wanted to transit locally, you could set the limit points very close and just second by second by second move at the incremental rate that you want from limit point to limit point using a magnetic drive. And this is what Elon Musk wants to do with his ships that float up over the ground, only he's talking rockets. So last millennium. Okay, so we're talking here about woo ships. And woo ships are basically pods here for the occupants to sit in and drive the vehicle. Okay, and a woo ship is very minimalistic. We can, or it can be as large as you want. So a woo ship could be like one of those, Star Wars or Battlestar Galactica or whoever the hell. I mean, they could be giant things. They could be the size of many planets and still operate under the same principles. Or they could be the size of a, just a regular smart car, and be little and very minimalist. What I favor, of course, is the sort of cigar-shaped one, in which you'd be able to have, this would be your woo RV, because you'd have a place to cook, you'd have beds, you have a place to put your fishing poles, it could be as large as you want, you have dining rooms and that kind of stuff, right? You could have a 3 or 4 bedroom RV if you wanted in this form, and it's going to be propelled by magnetic influences. So woo ships go on what we call mag drive. And we can explain, and I can describe to you a great many aspects of how to create these woo ships, of how to create the Tic Tac UFO and others that we have seen. I've investigated this. I bounced ideas off of other individuals that are working in other areas that are sort of related. And there's been some level of conclusion that I've been able to form. And some of those conclusions, along with reading in Boscovich, have led to a number of patents that are on the way to necessary stuff that we need for these, right? And so a woo ship is going to be magnetically isolated from the rest of the environment. And so it'll automatically, when you fire it up, it will create a particular kind of a magnetic field that isolates it from the rest of the local environment. So basically what you're doing in mag drive, scooting from here to Zurich, say, right, is that you're using this in the magnetic influences. You're isolating this ship relative to the rest of the Earth's magnetic field. So, so this, all right, how do I want to say it? Okay, so the arcing lines of the Earth's magnetic field would see this, would not even see that that existed. It would be magnetically isolated such that you wouldn't even exist insofar as the Earth's magnetosphere was concerned. It would be an anomaly. It would just be something sitting there. And then the beauty of this is that it's magnetically isolated in a particular way. And that particular way isolates the individuals in the ship itself from any influences of the magnetism. Bear in mind, we're going to be dealing with magnetism sufficient to remove this from gravity, which isn't that much. I mean, you can do little levitation experiments with magnets very easily, and so one magnet here can levitate another magnet very easily against gravity, and gravity is known to be a weak force. But we're going to be using this to propel us across material space, and this is going to be magnetism at a level that we don't usually encounter. So it's necessary that we be isolated internally as well as externally. And the way in which the skin of the woo ship is formed is that the skin material has isolating magnetic fields, structures in on both sides of it, on both the inside and the outside. So we'll just say this is the inside and here's the outside. Okay, so that's external. This field forms such that it traps, it's a dynamic magnetic field, such that it traps incoming magnetism. Incoming magnetism would try and come in this way, assuming the external shield was not there. It'd go through the very magnetically porous material, but then it's going to get eaten up by the dynamic layer here of this particular kind of a magnetic shield. And this magnetic shield is formed basically from the what I call the high effect of the ability to fold and blend magnets into unusual shapes, non-natural shapes, by altering the nature of the dielectric planes relative to each other in altering the magnetic fields and embedding some lines of magnetic force within another, literally weaving the magnetic field. And so this magnetic field would be woven, so to speak, and would protect the occupant. It would maintain Earth ambient magnetism within the structure of the woo ship. And so you'd have, it wouldn't be this massive, it wouldn't be this size. It would be, see, there's our natural formation. It would be miniature. You can do it in miniature in the materials as you put them together. This all would be a sandwich. And so basically it's going to be a sandwich that would look like a metallic version of a printed circuit board. And we'll pulse electricity through it, and we'll pulse electricity through this side, and we'll pulse electricity through this side, and the material in the middle will be magnetically or electrically isolating, and it will allow us to create these opposing magnetic fields that will isolate the structure of this vessel. And then the outside of it, then it becomes isolated also, as I say, from the magnetic influences of the planet. So if it were clear and of sufficient size and had air in it, and you could remotely turn on this effect, you have your little machine inside like a big clear beach ball or something, right? You could turn on the magnetic effect so that it was no longer feeling anything from the Earth magnetically. It wouldn't try and hold it down or anything. And you could just set the beach ball, which would be at this stage heavier than air, out in the sun filled with air, and it would, as Buckminster Fuller said, lift tremendously and just keep going. Because it would not be in any way affected by the stuff in the ether that's affecting everything else and keeping us all on this planet. You have to go into Boscovich in some depth to get this understanding of how it all works. But the oscillations, as I was saying, was the key to my thinking, oh geez, he's describing a manner in which these tic-tac-toe UFOs work. Because when they come zooming in, you'll see in the videos, they come zipping in, and then they sit there and oscillate, just vibrate like all hell. And then just before they leave, they oscillate and then zip out. And that oscillation is key because it's this limit point of coherence, cohesion, attraction, whatever you want to say, however you want to characterize it. All right, so in any event, so our skin of our vessel here creates a magnetically isolated medium, keeping Earth's magnetosphere ambient inside and totally isolating it from the magnetosphere on the outside. And then on the outside, it's a little bit more complex because we have magnetic fields that are both directionals. All right, so in and out, so to speak, internal and external. And this allows us to change, so to speak, to like phase change this outside field. And that would mean that we could pump electricity through the skin in such a way that from here over to here, we would have repulsive force. Those are all supposed to be R's. And so that's our repulsive force on this side. And then we change it so that we're attractive over here. So we have the attractive. Now the attractive is the weaker of the magnetic forces. It's the centripetal. The centrifugal is the repulsive force, and it is the far more powerful. And we just make it attractive in a band however far we want. And then what we do is we fire this up. It would be repelled, so it would repel against the Earth's magnetosphere on this side and would be attracted to whatever we were aiming at on this side. And so it would go in that direction. And it has a very interesting and unique method of movement, as we see when we get into Boscovich and read in part 2, in the upper 200s or upper 300s, I can't remember where it was in relation to those, where he discusses the movement of materials in fermentation, viscosity, in simple chemistry, and how that is actually occurring within an etheric understanding of these, okay? And so that same understanding allows us to grasp that the magnetic, we set up a magnetic repulsion here, and the Earth's magnetic field naturally just pushes us. And then if we set up an attraction field here, it's going to pull us that way. So this, if we were cruising at, 100 feet, then this would allow us to slowly start landing, right? That's how you would land this critter, is you would magnetically zero in on the Earth while magnetically repelling from the Earth's magnetosphere on the back side. So you're not falling. This is all guided movement. Very rapid too. But you're going to be isolated on the inside because of this isolation at a magnetic level. Is also going to work at an inertial level. Now, this is an basic understanding of a woo ship, and it doesn't matter how big they are. There are certain engineering issues, obviously, if you're making it the size of, Manhattan Island or something, right? You got issues if you're moving large mass and a lot of electricity, and you've got a large mass for the fields. The fields become complex. They have a tendency to degrade as you get to certain conditions. You have to put in areas to pump them up. There's all different kinds of things that have to be done to engineer at that level. But for the little guys, and even for the large ones, they are conceptually all working this way. Now, I've got third generation night vision goggles, like military, crawl through the jungle kind of night vision goggles, right? And so these have magnifiers on them. The optics were hand-picked for me for absolutely no distortion that could be achieved. There's still, of course, obviously imperfections. But nonetheless, that noted, I have a 145-mile view into the atmosphere with these pre-sunset or post, or pre-sunrise or post-sunset. So just before dawn. So let me just quickly sketch that. Okay, so yeah, okay. This is Earth. The sunlight's, let's just say the sunlight's going to come from this direction, and I'm sitting right here. As the sunlight comes on up here, just before the sun gets up high enough relative, or the Earth rotates is what happens. Just before we rotate enough to where we can actually get direct sunlight to me, the sunlight is actually illuminating this area of space up over my position, and that's 145 miles out there. And so I've got a view of 145 miles out into space just before the sun comes up or just after it's gone down because of the reverse effect there. So these goggles are good. Now, I have seen a ship, I've seen a woo ship, I've seen the little floaty triangle things, the TR-3Bs or whatever they call them. But I've actually seen two types of vehicles that I say are space alien, because they didn't move. They were not in any way, shape, or form like anything that humans have invented so far or demonstrated conceptually so far in movies or any of this kind of stuff. And it was just fantastically cool to see. And one of them was clearly operating in a mag drive. And I know this now. I didn't at the time I saw it, which would have been maybe 2012, 2010, something. No, it would have been 2011 or 12, something like that. Okay, so I didn't understand at that time. I hadn't gotten into Boscovich, hadn't read into the understanding of it, didn't have the Tic Tac UFO footage to examine. But I now know that the UFO that I saw was operating on a mag drive, because it is predictable that mag drives operating for large vessels will have a tell, okay? And that is that they'll flash, they'll create light as an aspect of this, just the same exact way that an LED creates light. They'll flash it out in these pulses, and then they'll move vast quantities. So you have a big one here, it flashes out, you get a flash of light as we look at it. Next thing we know, it's way the hell over here, having crossed a giant arc of space. And then you see it flash light again, and it appears to jump into the light and disappear. It's not actually quite doing that, but as it creates the field distortion in the ether to jump to the next limit point, as that occurs, primary light is created. And that's what I saw with those night vision goggles all those years ago. Now I understand what they were doing. All right, so this is where we're at in concept. The interior, of course, you're going to have to deal with all of the interior issues, right? Is it white tile in the kitchen or not? Also things like oxygen and meaningful stuff like keeping yourself warm, when you get there, because you're going to want to explore, that sort of thing. We know some of the things about the manufacturing of the skin and how it'll have to be a sandwich. We also know some of the aspects of the operation of it. Now, one of the reasons for this particular video today was to offer an opportunity to anybody that watches it. And I am unfortunately not in a position to demonstrate because I don't have a piece of copper plate. I wanted to have a chunk of copper plate. because I wanted to demonstrate this stuff called magnetic braking or copper braking, okay? And that's where you have a copper plate, plate material, and you can take a magnet and you can suspend that magnet on a string from a hook or something and have that magnet come down to within a small distance of the copper plate. Now, this string, when you bring the magnet back up here, and you have your string stretched out here, well, it wouldn't be that far. I'm distorting because of my position. But anyway, okay, so when you do this, and you bring your magnet up here and you're holding your magnet, and you release your magnet, it's going to swoop down here, and it's going to stop. It's going to stop right here. As soon as it gets into the plate enough, depending on the thickness of the plate, it can stop within its own length right on the edge if the copper is thick enough. If it's thin copper, it may move a distance, but it will not rise out to the other side of the copper plate. This is the magnetic braking effect. And this is because the magnets drag the magnetic field through the copper, and they actually encounter and generate resistance a la Steinmetz and Heaviside as they move, as the magnetic force lines are literally pulled through the copper plate. It's like pulling your fingers through sand, okay? Drive your hand into sand and then pull your fingers through the sand. That's the effect of magnetic lines of force through copper. The copper interreacts, it provides resistance. This is also the nature of resistance in electrical wiring itself, because of the nature of what happens to the spin of the ether as the magnetic line is drawn through the copper, or the copper is moved through the magnetic field, either way. Okay, so this is where we're at right at the moment. We understand this, we know this, all of our devices are basically, all of our electronics that we're dealing with here all work because of this magnetic braking principle, because it allows us to use copper to generate electricity from the dielectric plane inside the magnet. As it's doing its work within the copper, it causes the copper to generate electricity over the skin and internally, but mostly over the skin of the copper. Okay, so what we're looking for, so myself and two other individuals, for their own purposes, not for my woo ships, but for their purposes, but they just happen to coincide. What we're looking for is, and this is the opportunity to anybody that hears this, is that we're on a discovery in the hunt. And if whoever discovers this first will may even get a Nobel Prize for all I know, right? But if you were to discover this first, it's like Niels Bohr, like ancient scientist kind of discovery. What we're looking for is the reverse, okay? We're looking for the anti-copper. And then before you start jumping up and saying, you know, rhodium or any of these other things, you got to have to understand what we're talking about, okay? Steel is not the anti-copper, all right? Ferrous metals are not the anti-copper. They interact with magnets. So here's what we're going to after. They become attracted to magnets. So we see here that you get, by the way, if you do this experiment with a heavy enough magnet that you actually can see the braking effect, you'll get oscillations as it settles in every damn time, as Boscovich is talking about. Okay, so this braking effect here with copper means that when you swing this here across copper, it's going to start slowing down as soon as the magnetic force lines start interacting with the copper, and it'll bring the magnet to a stop. We want the reverse of this. So it's my supposition that there are two metals out there that we have yet, I mean humans, have yet to locate and recognize that they do what I'm going to describe. But what we're after is this metal X, okay, X metal. And X metal is going to have an interesting property because it's going to be the reverse of copper relative to the braking. And so we'll say that we're going to be pretty in pink or purple here, and X metal. And X metal is going to have this effect. Instead of having the braking effect when you release it, when it starts hitting the, let me put it over here, when it starts hitting the edge of the sheet, it's going to speed up. It's going to be like a slick. It's going to be like, Tom Cruise in his socks hitting that wax floor. It's going to be, a dog on a wax floor just scooting right across. You're going to go a lot faster as soon as you hit this metal. Okay, and we want this metal for a particular reason, but it has been determined by my conclusion that we'll get this speed up effect, that it will go way the hell up, and then it'll come down and go way the hell back up this way, and then go way the hell up. It'll gradually oscillate because gravity will ultimately overcome the slickness of metal X, okay? So it'll gradually oscillate down and stop. But it will measurably be faster when you do this braking experiment over it. Is this a pure metal like copper? I don't know. I've tried a number of different metals, and I've found that all different kinds of metals have some level of magnetic effect that I was not prepared to find. And we know these metals have magnetic effects because they use some of them in like computer chips and stuff, right? And so gallium arsenide, all right? So arsenide's the processing base for the gallium in order to create the LED process that we use, or the magnetic and electric process that we use to generate light with LEDs. And gallium is used in that. Okay, so I tried gallium. I've tried tin, I've tried all different kinds of other things. Tin has some very interesting compounding effects. So tin and copper make for an interesting magnetic interaction. Tin and copper separated by distance, and probably some other metal, have an even more interesting interaction. I'm certain it's a metal, although it may not be a metallic as we recognize it, because it may not be a pure metal. It may be a metal that is, compounded with some other material to get us to metal X. But this stuff if we can get this, then we can achieve huge breakthroughs very rapidly, because this particular property that we're after is going to be key in many of our manufacturing process, as well as the final woo ship itself. Because this allows us to isolate in so many different ways. Anyway, though, so the slickness aspect of this is basically, as you will understand, meaning that the magnetism is coming in here and getting twisted or repulsed on its own. It is not interfering with the molecular structure of our metal X. And so as far as it's concerned, the metal X is actually like slick like glass, but it's not, but it's more than just glass or paper or wood or something like that, because this thing will actually accelerate the magnet, because the magnetic field itself will participate in shoving the magnet across our metal X as rapidly as it can do so, because of the interaction of this down to the metal down here. There are some suggestions that gold can be used in this process, and we are in the process of exploring that. But understandably, smacking out a bunch of gold and doing experiments with and burning it up with acids and stuff, it gets to be real expensive, and it's messy, and I was hoping to actually run across somebody that could do a lot of computer modeling for us and get us close to the metal X based on some of these descriptions that I'm trying to lay out here. Once we get that, we can get so many other devices, and if somebody can find that, the very first thing they need to do is to figure out some way to patent it so that they protect themselves and can benefit from it financially, and then call me or discuss this with me and clue me in as to what it is, and in return I will share with you two aspects of it that you may not have considered that would also be profitable to explore, that are non-obvious. So it would benefit. So basically, if you discover it, I can make it worth your while to tell me about it. And even if we have to work out a licensing agreement for it so that I can use it, that's fine. Okay, all I want to do is build woo ships. I don't want to make money off of Metal X. That's not my goal. But I will help you do that for finding the Metal X for me. And then we have a couple of other technical issues to overcome, many other materials issues that we're addressing at the moment. And then there's one of the technical issues that we have to overcome. We know conceptually many aspects of it, and we also know conceptually enough of its description to be able to begin an effective hunt for it. So we're on our way to our woo ship's construction. And basically, it'll be really cool when we actually do this, because in order to make the woo ship, it'll be very much like forming, like an aluminum pod or something. We can build anything inside it we want, as long as we don't mess with this outer skin, and all the electrical controls and stuff to the skin are fine. And then it doesn't matter what's on the inside. We'll have to deal with things like, if you're going to be living in there and you're potentially on an area where there's no atmosphere, because once that shield is there, by the way, you can go underwater. Water would not penetrate this magnetic isolation shield because of the nature of what we're doing with this magnetic field. It's not that it's going to be water repellent, but the water would just the viscosity would be destroyed on the vibration of the dynamic magnetic field on the outside in terms of isolation. So it wouldn't matter if you're in air, water, space, you'd be able to just fly anywhere in these things. And they're going to be self-protecting. You could have two of them crash into each other and the occupants might actually feel that kind of a bump, and these things would be bouncing off each other. But because it would be magnetic field to magnetic field, the force, no matter how fast they were going or how far they've come with that kind of inertia behind them, would be destroyed almost instantly as the limit points of repulsions were reached. You'd have to deal with really large magnets to see that effect and feel it personally, but it's absolutely remarkable. And then, now, one quick last thing, and then we can shut this off. This is for Elon Musk's cars, okay? Because so what Musk wants to do is he wants to have some kind of rocket, is my understanding. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe he wasn't thinking rockets at all and I misunderstood. But he wanted to have a car that's going to hover up over a road surface about 5 or 6 feet. And it's a pretty chunky little car. It's a Jetson kind of car, and there's the doggo sitting in the back seat, and there's George, and he's over here driving. Okay, and he's got his arm out the window, and the dog's leaning out. Anyway, so they want to hover a certain distance off the road. Now, of course, we all know about maglev trains, and maglev trains have magnets that have repulsion here and magnets that have repulsion there, and they repel each other, and you've got them balanced, and they're good, and they go, assuming that they don't overheat and all these other conditions. However, with our particular approach, again, you could isolate this whole thing from the local, which is to say Earth, magnetic influence, and have no intention of ever taking this into space, or have no intention of taking this thing underwater, right? And the same effect can be achieved 6 feet up or 8 feet up or whatever, and you would still have this anti-collision barrier from the magnets, from the magnetism to anything else. I don't know, for instance, if a small enough high-speed particle could get through it. On these low-level ones, could you shoot the thing? Maybe. Maybe you could get a bullet to go through the field. I don't know. It's going to depend on the conceptual, because it's not real, conceptual thickness that the field is dialed to. Because you can make them very thick if you wanted. And that's the key here, is that you can make this thing thick enough as a magnetic isolation field that it would actually, just in and of that self, without the other parts of the woo ship mag drive, but just within that part itself, it would have a tendency to not want to come back to Earth. Just like the beach ball thing, right? Because it's going to be not attracted to other particles. And you really have to understand, it's not attracted to other stuff, other ether manifestations within the ether and within the field that we see as particles. And because of that non-attraction to them, that isolation, it would just sort of sit there. If there was a big air gust, it could be pushed down because it's going to be there physically. But it's in and of itself, it would not really have any tendency to want to come down and rest on the road. And in a sense, then, you would be walking on magnetic legs that had their own level of repulsion to the road itself. And this is part of Metal X. Once we can get Metal X, then we can do this as well. And I can explain that in some other video. And thanks, guys. Somebody the other day was put me over 100,000 subscribers. Thanks very much. Live long and prosper to that individual. I'm sure universe will reward you as it should. I'll never know who it was. And I guess that's about it for woo ships. There's tons more, obviously, tons more. And okay, so now one other thing I wanted to get into, and this is an errata, okay, an addendum. This doesn't relate to woo ships, but it relates to the magnetic electrical generators. I've contacted two distributors, or two manufacturers that say they're in production and setting up distribution centers and sites, and I've had no response back. I've tried many different approaches to get hold of these people because I have money. I want one of these critters, right? I want one of them. Even if it's only going to work 4 or 5 years, I want to investigate this technology and get involved with it. It's the ultimate green, after all, right? Even the progressives will go for magnetic home electrical units, right? So I want one of them, and I've got some crypto money, and there's something I was thinking about. Crypto people will want to buy these. I know a lot of people that are outfitting expedition level RVs, and so they're going to want a little 3 or 4 kilowatt version for their RVs. And I was going to buy it and basically use it and tell people about it, unbox and the whole deal, right? So if you've got one, if you're actually shipping, get hold of me. I can boost sales pretty tremendously. I've got 100,000 subscribers here, but I've got far greater reach into the crypto world, and crypto people have money now and they want to buy these buggers. So, you know, if you're producing them, tell us what we have to do to get these critters, and please contact me. I've tried several of these companies so far, nothing has come back. And that's just to let you know. As soon as I find out that we've got one of these things operational, I will let you know. As soon as I've got one in my hands and I can spark myself with it because it's producing electricity, then I've got plans. I've got some seriously cool plans, and I'll start doing stuff right away just because that makes the ultimate, for me, the ultimate situation doable. And that is 100% off-grid living with your magnetic home electrical generator and Starlink. So you've got space-based Wi-Fi and electricity to run it. And then you can live anywhere and, you know, drill a well, get a road in there, or hell, pack it in on a boat and set it up on the beach and cut your own chunk out of the wilderness, and there you go. So off-grid living anywhere becomes feasible. And then with my mag drive, hey, you're living out in the middle of, you know, Podunk Aleutian Island because you want to go and study the seals or something, but you want to, you know, clean yourself up, scrape off all the seal gunk and hop into your mag drive and zip into Maxime's for some lunch. You know, Paris is just 2 seconds away in one of these vehicles. So anyway, that's where we're headed, guys. Live long and prosper. Thanks much, and I'll let you know if we get any of these magnetic drive guys to connect with me, and if not, I'm actually involved with people and we're trying to build them. So because it's feasible, you can do this.